Have you seen the new Pfaff quilt binder? I'm going to show you exactly what comes in the box and how to bind your quilts the easiest way. I'm going to show you how to turn a sharp corner and also how to end it. Those are questions we get all the time. And now it's time to explore what this is capable of doing. So today I spent a little time working with the quilt binder. So I do tell you, you got to give it a couple tries. You got to practice a little bit. But once you realize how easy it is and all you have to do is go around four corners, your quilts can be bound very quickly. Now I will tell you that I tend to bind the quilts that are my show quilts. For example, the quilts behind me, those are ones where I do that traditional French fold and hand stitch them on the back. This quilt here is the one that we finished with our Pfaff Stitching Cosmos online course. So if you're interested in learning over 25 different sewing techniques and 18 different presser feet, I want you to click on the link below this YouTube video and check out some of the lessons for free and how much you can use your Pfaff sewing machine for. There's absolutely no embroidery in either of these quilts. So we're very excited and we want to say thank you and welcome to all of our Pfaff Stitching Cosmos students that are already online. So let's first talk about what comes in the box and a few things that I like to have close by when I put binding on a quilt with a quilt binder. So in the box, it's going to be folded up, the actual tool, the part that you actually need to open up, and it's tight, so go ahead and unfold it. This is the part where the binding is going to sit, feed in, and then go right out the foot. So speaking of foot, there is an extra Pfaff foot with the IDT opening in the back included, and they just call it a quilt foot. Okay, so not anything special, but there's an actual foot in there. You might want to label that and keep it separate with your quilt binder when you're not using it. It has a little guide on it, so it helped me keep everything nice and even. Now, next, you do need to actually have the throat plate with the two holes on it for this to attach to. So if you have an older Pfaff, you want to check with your Pfaff retailer and make sure that you can actually attach this to your current machine. But you might need to buy the new throat plate. This is a Pfaff Creative Icon, the two icons, and some of the newer Pfaffs already have this throat plate as part of their standard accessory. So if you have two holes, you're good to go. So there is the plate that will attach to the throat plate. There's some screws and some washers. I'm going to show you how to attach that. Next, let's talk about the width of strip that you're going to be using. This is a strip that is cut 1 3/4 inches wide. And I love the fact that Pfaff puts right here on the binder what the finished size, which will be about 1/2 inch, and then what to cut the strip. So I don't have to look it up. It's written right on the quilt binder. So another thing for cutting, you can cut straight a grain. I prefer a bias cut. It has just a little bit of give when it goes through the quilt binder. I think it's really gives it that nice finesse as we're kind of going around curves and corners and getting them to look perfect. If you have an AccuQuilt cutter, they do make a 1 3/4 inch die, so you can cut those. And I even have a video, which you can click on right up here, on how to cut bias strips on an AccuQuilt cutter. So if you have that die already, bonus, you're going to be ready to load up this. So I've gone ahead and seamed my strips together. One thing I do like to do is use a smaller stitch length when I join my strips together, and then I press that open. This has also been starched, so if you have some best press around, starch up your fabric. It just makes it all work really well. The other couple things that I have close by is my seam ripper, which I use as a stiletto to help things going through easily, and my new favorite friend, a glue stick. So I'm going to show you a couple places. We'll use it in the corners and also how to end the quilt binding when we're done. You're going to need some pins as well. So I think we are ready to bind the small little quilt that I've set aside special for showing you how the Pfaff quilt binder and how easy it is to use. Start by going ahead and putting the foot that's included on the machine. And there's a little guide on this side that will help keep everything going. I also have made sure my bobbin is full because once I put this on, you actually have to take the quilt binder off to refill your bobbin. So just kind of keep in mind, have that preloaded before you attach everything. This little attachment just sits right into the hole. Take one of the screws and actually mount that so it doesn't move. There's really only one way to do it. Next, there are 2 washers and 2 more screws that you'll find for attaching the quilt binder to this base plate. So go ahead and set it right on the front. Take one of the washers and then one of the screws, and I'm going to just get it started. This is one thing that you're going to need to try out and make sure that you have it, because it can shift left to right, and also your needle positions are going to be your best friend. On the Pfaff machines, you have tons of needle positions, so getting it set up, whether you go left to right here or where it best works for you. And I'm going to go ahead, I think that's about where I had it. The one thing nice is that once you have it set, you can just unscrew this screw back here and keep it all attached to the base plate, and then maybe even make a note of what needle position you liked when you're using it. When you're working with your strips, you do need to make sure, of course, that you load this strip with the wrong side facing you. So right now with the solid color, I'm going to make sure I can see my seam. It is facing me. And then just go ahead and bring it all the way to the end and start to feed it in. And this is where my seam ripper, or stiletto if you have that, starts to come in. So you're just going to slide this all the way down, and then as soon as it comes out the lower part, it just sits into this little U shape and creates these little lips. It's already folded the fabric down for me. The next thing that I want to do is just kind of set the fabric strip in the little fence here. And then another thing that I sometimes do is I'll just kind of take my vertical spool pin and I'm kind of just bringing the rest of the strip kind of up and out of the way. I want to keep as much weight of it off the quilt binder. You don't want it dragging down here on the front and then it kind of not feeding as nice and even. Okay, so I can see that my fabric is kind of touching the edge of my foot, so that's good. And then my needle position, I'm going to just kind of take it back to where I was using it. The other thing for your stitch length, so when you're working through all these layers, you've got batting, you've got seams in your quilt, you're going to eventually go over a seam that it took to make these strips, is maybe a little longer stitch length. I've gone ahead and moved it up to 3 millimeters long. Also too, make sure the needle that you have in your machine is maybe a top stitch needle, a sharp needle. That could be a Microtex needle, it could be a denim needle. Pick something that's a little sharper and it'll make some nice, good, crisp stitches all the way down. Okay, so the next thing you can do, and here is a trick. When we get to the corners, but I'm going to do it right now, is if you lift your foot into the highest lift position, did you hear that? That's the feed dog's lowering. So you can actually easily maneuver the edge of the quilt underneath the foot without those teeth kind of resisting it coming in. So you're just going to kind of settle that in. Now notice that I am actually starting quite close to this corner because when I come back around, I'm going to show you the little trick about how soon to cut your strip so it turns out perfect when you go to match it up at the very once we get all the way around. Okay, so once you take a few stitches, and if it's not just perfect right at the beginning, that's okay. We could, again, cut off a few of those first couple stitches until you get a place that we can overlap and then nobody sees that. But again, I would recommend that you do a couple strips. And one of the things that you're going to need to know is that it's not going to be perfect the first time you do it. It took me a couple times to really understand how this works and how to kind of get it to feed the way you want it to. And I heard a good quote lately that I want to share with you, and it says, "Don't let perfect get in the way of good." And that really made sense to me. So sometimes we want it so perfect that we don't realize that it's actually good. And so keep that in mind as you get started. But I am close to this corner. We're going to start right away, and then I'm going to show you my little glue trick for turning the corner. So you can see everything is feeding nice and even. I'm going to go ahead and stitch, and what I want to stitch down to is right to the edge of your quilt for the first time. I like to actually take my stitches, once I get a little bit almost to the edge, shorten that stitch length down to maybe 1.5. You want to just go right to the edge. Next, now here's a couple tips along the way. First off, we need to kind of, you see how this is coming out? If you lower the presser foot down, you can kind of crease that fabric, and then it gets it ready for that perfect corner that we're about ready to do. I'm going to lift up the foot, slide forward for just another little touch down and a little extra crease happening right there. Now, did you notice that I did not use my thread cutter? And I'm going to show you why. Because what we can do is we can actually pull these strings all the way kind of off to the side, and then this way, if you need to take any like little finishing stitches, you already have thread, you can just put on a needle, take those few stitches, and then close it up. The other reason I'm going to skip using my thread cutter is because when I go to start, I don't want it to take those locking stitches and make that kind of extra thick knot at the corner. So just avoid using your scissors there. Okay, so next off, you're going to go ahead and pull this out, and you're going to kind of create this little nose angle. And as you do so, you're going to kind of crease it on the back side. So as I bring this all the way around, I'm going to kind of give that a little crease. Now, wouldn't that be nice if we just put a little bit of the glue in there? I did this one time and then realized that it kind of worked a little better. It kind of held everything. I'm still going to pin it, but for right now, I'm going to just put a little glue on this back side, and then as I make that little corner, I'm going to really kind of bring that over. Bring it over on the back a little further than you think you need to, and then just go ahead and put a pin on the back to hold that in place. We're also going to pin the front, so that's what it's going to look like on the back. Then bring the edge of the front over. And again, if you're thinking glue is going to be a friend of yours as well, put some little glue in there, bring that in. And you kind of notice that I'm pulled away from the quilt binder right now, but that's okay because we're just going to back this all the way up once we get started. So I'm going to just kind of get everything in. Let's lift that presser foot all the way up, let those feed dogs drop, and then that way as we kind of position this back underneath the presser foot, we can just pull it all the way back and then slide it in to where you need to go. I would suggest that as you first get started, is kind of make sure that that underneath part really is not like pulled away. You want that needle to come right on down. And I'm going to actually lower my needle down into the fabric by hand. That way I'm not going to land right on top of one of those pins, and I can kind of pull them out. Remember, my stitch length is still kind of on the short side, so a couple stitches, just 1, 2, 3, can kind of help lock that in position and then return it back to the 3.0 millimeter stitch length, and off you go. So that is how the corner is going to look. So we're just going to go ahead and finalize the side. Once the side gets going, that's the easy part. The corner is a little tricky, but look how fun that is. Oh, and we nailed it on the back. I probably will not need, there we go. I will probably not need to hand stitch anything, so I can just clip those threads, no problem. But let me go ahead and do the rest of the corners, and I will meet you at the other end to show you how perfect you can finish this quilt binding with this awesome tool. I've turned my last corner, and now for the trick of ending it. So first off, if you measure from your needle all the way to where you want to overlap your beginning stitches, once you get to about 7 inches between those 2 points, you can actually clip this. I'm going to show you where to clip it. But first I'm going to kind of just clip this down to size, since it actually started off pretty good, but I'm going to end up overlapping it, so I'm just going to kind of cut it down so it doesn't have anything extra right there. And then as I come over to this little fence right here, now it seems like it's going to be a little bit not long enough, but right where the fence is, if you just take your scissors and cut right down and take your glue stick, and then we're going to fold over about 1/4 of an inch. And when you glue that edge right there and fold it, it will end at the perfect place. Now, I have done this a couple times, and I always get a little nervous because it doesn't seem like it is long enough to get all the way down through the edge. But trust me, it is going to be perfect. So we're just going to let that last little bit come all the way down. And it is going to be very close. So I cut it, I bet I measured a little bit extra, but look, oh, yep. I don't know why I second guessed myself, but it actually turned out just the way it needs to be. If you need to, just tuck that right on in. Like I said, it is so deceiving. It looks like it's not going to make it, but it made it with a good, almost a ½ inch overlap. So where it feels like it's not going to work, it will work. You just have to trust yourself. And then you can use your scissors and cut that. So that is how easy it is to go around an entire quilt and see the different, how it finishes up. It is pretty amazing. When you can get a corner that looks this good, you are going to find yourself realizing that quilt binder is going to be worth its weight in gold. So I hope you'll give it a try. Again, check with your local PFAFF retailer for if this accessory fits your particular PFAFF model, and I hope you will have all your quilts that are hanging out, waiting to be bound, all completed soon. I hope to see you in some of our online courses where the links below this YouTube video will give you access to some free lessons and ways that you can learn how to use your PFAFF machine even more. So I hope you've enjoyed the quilt binder, and we'll see you next time.